My name's David Welch. I'm at Brothers Tech Center today to show you how to do rust repair on Sal's 1962 Chevy pickup. This is a really common repair that you see all the time that's needed. This one needs the brace in the back too, so I'll be showing you how to do that. I'm also going to be doing some other things on this truck, so you make sure you subscribe and you're going to be able to watch every single one of them. Now, before I start taking anything apart, I want to assess the overall vehicle and I want to see what kind of damage might have already been done in this area. Maybe everything lines up and you want to make sure that it stays exactly in the same place. Maybe it wasn't built that good at the factory, maybe it's been hammered up. So what you're going to want to do is take a look at all of those things and fix all of those problems at the same time when you're doing your repair. A couple other things I want to mention too is what not to do. Don't just take everything apart and scatter it everywhere. Just grab yourself one nice little project, tackle that project, get it done, bolt it back on, and then move to the next project. I got WD-40 and I shot all the bolts and got them all nice and wet. It's been sitting for a day or so, they're all soaked up, and now it's going to be easier to take it apart. And the first thing I want to be doing is taking off the bumper here. Now, technically speaking, you can take the fender off without doing the bumper, but it'll scratch it up here and it's more difficult to do. So just go ahead and take off the bumper. Then I'll go ahead and I'll take off all of my bolts on the bottom, and then I'll take my bolts off on the top. The reason I'm doing it that way is because if I take all these bolts off on the top and then I find out that the bottom one's all rusted on and stuff, it's going to be falling over on me while I'm working on that. So if I take off my lower bolts, no big deal, it'll just hang there. Then I can take the top bolts off nice and easy and take the fender off with no problem at all. I'm going to get this set up a little bit more. You stay tuned, I'm going to be right back. Alright, so this is a pretty common problem that you're going to run into right here. This bolt's coming out really hard, and if I keep going on it, more than likely it's going to strip the caged nut that's on the bottom of this. We don't want that to happen, so we're going to take a little bit of oil and we're going to shoot it up in here, and then we're going to actually bolt it back down. And what that's going to do for us is that when you were trying to unbolt this and it's coming through on the nut down at the bottom, you're taking all that dirt and jamming it up in there. So we're going to bolt it back down. That'll hopefully let the dirt fall off, and then I can bring it back up. Now, you might need to do this several times, and it is kind of a bore, but it's a lot better than trying to weld on another nut. Also, when you're taking everything apart, make sure you bag and tag. Even keep the bolts you don't think you'll need, because every once in a while there's a little weird guy in there that you're going to need to keep. Okay, so we're going to take our cowl off next. Now, one of the things about these cowls is that they have normally got shims in there so that it put it in the right place. If it is in the right place and you like it there, go ahead and save all the shims, mark where they came from, because it could be in each four corners. There's two bolts hiding on you. One's right here, and the other one is right down here. So make sure that door does not shut on you or it is gonna mess it up. I'm gonna get this guy off, and there's two bolts right in here. We're just about ready. Now, with my cowl off right here, I can get to the two bolts that are right here. And another thing you want to notice about those is that they will more than likely have shims in there too to bring it in and out. If it lines up good, make sure you save the shims and you mark where they came from. If they don't, no big deal, we'll fix that out later. So it'll just come off just like that. I want to show you this little fastener right here. This is a unique way they have to hold down the mud flap right here. And you can see that it has about 4 of them in there, and how you take it out is you just put a screwdriver right in the middle of the slit, if you will. You knock it down some, and that's going to spread it out, and then that will take these ends right here and put them together. When you're going to put it back together, you simply insert it, and then you take a screwdriver, pliers, and you press them together. That makes this spread out, holding on your mud flap. All right, now before I get slicing and dicing, I want to make sure that my patch panel goes exactly where it went before. When we were looking at it on the truck, this right here lined up perfectly with our rocker panel, so we know this is in the right spot. To keep it in the right spot, I'm just going to go ahead and measure. I'll come up about 12 inches here, and I'll mark that. Another thing I'm going to do is take a piece of cardboard, and I'm going to put it up against the side right here, and I'm going to trace this out. Now the reason that we do that is that when you're cutting out the inner core and the outside patch panel, it's easy to get it a little bit off, and we want to make sure that curvature stays perfect. Now you can see that the patch panel that you get from us is really nice and large. I don't want to use this much unless I absolutely have to, because the more welding I do, the more chances I have to warp things and such and such. So what I'm going to do is just take a grinder, and I'm just going to grind and look for where the rust edges are, and then make sure I don't have anything hiding, dents or what have you, and I'll see exactly what size I need my patch panel first. Generally what it's going to be is at least an inch away from any bad metal you got. So this is obvious, but the little pinholes that can be surrounding something like this aren't necessarily obvious. Here are just some minor pinholes that are in here. So I'm going to make sure I go up at least an inch and come over at least an inch here. Now I'm not going to cut this out right now, and the reason being is this. I actually want to do my inside patch panel, or my inside core support first. If I were to cut the outside off, then I wouldn't necessarily know where this goes exactly. So I'll gently take out the old one, and when I cut it, so I'm going to go about an inch past my pits here, and I don't want to do my patch panel on the outside and my core support on the same plane, on the same line, because if I do that, it kind of acts like a hinge and it makes it harder to operate. So what I'll do when I put this piece in, I'll make sure that it's nice and long. That'll give me good support and help me out. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this down to make it a little bit easier to get it in here and line it up a little bit before I start cutting out my on the inside. Now I still may not use this entire length, but the holes right here, they'll line up right here, and it helps me to line up the rest of the patch panel and everything. Another thing I like to do is measure where the bolt hole is from side to left and make sure that it's in the right place. So I've got my brace here to a manageable size. It's easier to see where I'm going to be cutting this and such. When I make a mark though, and I am cutting, I'm not going to cut right on the line. I'm going to give myself a little bit of extra forgiveness room, because sometimes you just need that. I'll go ahead and I'll cut this here, and then right here you'll notice that there are spot welds. If you go ahead and you grind the paint off a little bit, it'll generally make the spot welds point out. You can go ahead and use a 3/8 drill bit, or you can use a spot weld cutter, but you will need to get these guys off. Then what I'll do is I'll go ahead and pry this up nice and gentle. There's some spot welds down here too, and then we'll get this guy on out of here. We'll do some trial fits with this. We'll double check all our measurements, and the magic will happen. Using a 3/8 drill bit to drill these spot welds out, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut the mass of this out. And now when I take that out, it'll make it easier to work with. It'll make these a little bit weaker, and then I can take this out without doing any damage to any of my lines here. Everything's coming apart really nice and easy. This last piece right here, what I'll generally do is just take a screwdriver, and in one of the holes that I drilled, I'll go ahead and hammer it out like that. Now I don't want to cut this real drastic here, so then I can just jiggle this back and forth, and I can get that last piece to come out of there. Of course, you got to make sure that all of this is staying nice and firm. We don't want to do any damage right here. We want to make sure that this is all staying nice and neat, so we're getting everything in the right spot. So you can comes out just like that. Now that that's out, I'll take this brace and I will put it right over the top. Remember that we cut this a little bit longer than we needed, and that is because we're going to go ahead and do all of our measurements and make sure it's exactly where we want it before we do that last cut. Now you might have to do some trimming on the edge. You might have to take this edge right here and fold it up a little bit or down a little bit. And the other reason that thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drill a hole down here, probably about a 3/4 of an inch hole. The reason that these rust is, of course, because dirt gets in the back here. The moisture, the dirt collects, it rusts. So we're going to have a nice large hole in here so all that dirt and moisture gets out and we don't have to do this repair again. Okay, so measure, measure, measure. That's always your kicker, to be measuring twice and only cut once. I had to play with this a bit down at the bottom to get my angles correctly. I didn't have to trim anything here. That was perfect. So this here is all set. Our inside piece is all ready to rock and roll. But we're not going to weld it in. Now we're going to go ahead and do the outside piece. And the reason we're doing it this way, not installing this just yet, is because if we cut this out and we work on it, I can go ahead and hammer and dolly from both sides and I can get the metal perfect before I go ahead and put this in. But if we had not done this yet, or if we hadn't done this first, then getting this to line up makes it a lot more difficult. Right here we've got rust pits. I want to make sure that I'm an inch above that at least, so I can go about here, go about an inch over here. I don't have to use my large patch panel, so what I can do is simply lay this over. I'm going to cut this panel out a little bit larger than what I think I need so that I can trim it down. Now when you cut out something like this right here, or when you're welding up something, if you take it and you have a specific point like this, a hard point, technically speaking, it builds up heat, miscellaneous things like that. So I like to curve this edge here a little bit. You don't really have to worry about it that big of a deal. Just a cute little thing to do if you're really going to get picky about stuff. So now what I'll do is I'll simply cut this piece off smaller. I'll lay it over, just double check, see how I like everything, and then I'll actually use this as a template right on top to cut the old piece out. So give me 1 second, I'll have that all done for you. Now I'll take my smaller piece, easier to work with, and I'll lay it right on top. I've got my 12-inch mark right here. I'll go ahead and measure that out and make sure that I've got my bottom exactly where I want it. And then sometimes even what I'll do is I'll go ahead and tack weld this on so it's not moving around on me when I'm cutting out the old piece. So it looks like we got a nice little fit right here. Next thing we'll be doing is taking these. These are patch panel clamps. So you see how this comes out right here? Goes right in the square hole down there, and then you clamp it up and it holds your panel together. So I'm going to go ahead and get these on here and have the panel held in there nice. Then I'll go ahead and double check all my measurements again. I've double checked my measurements. I know I have this where I like it. Now I'm just going to get some tack welds on. Now let's say for instance you're not confident with this. No big deal. Just take the fender with the clamps on it, go ahead and bolt it onto the truck, make sure this lines up, and then you're good to go. Now one of the reasons I don't use gloves is because I need to be able to feel my metal. I'm feeling this metal right here and I'm making sure it's absolutely as flat as I can get it. And then I'm just going to get me a little tack weld in there here and there. After I get a few tack welds in there to hold it up some, you can go ahead and take off one of the patch panel clamps and then get a little tack weld there. One of the things that you really need to keep in mind when doing this type of work is that heat is your enemy, and we have to keep heat down to an absolute minimum. So tack welds are going to be spaced apart. We're going to let the metal cool down before we do any additional welding, and we're not going to let it get hot. Another thing I'd like to say is that you notice the space in between the metal. You might think to yourself, well, I'm going to just butt that right up against each other and I'm going to weld right there. The problem is that when you grind that weld off, if it didn't penetrate all the way through, your weld's going to break. So you need a little bit of a gap in there for the weld to be in there, so that after you grind it, it's still there and it's still holding. And constantly feel the metal. You're going to be tack welding, it'll make the metal warp, so just constantly feel it, and if anything is getting off, stop, fix it, and then continue. All right, now I don't want to do all my welding. It's going to build a lot of heat, and then I'm going to have to do a lot of grinding to do even more heat. So what I'll do is just get a couple of tack welds, let it cool down, and then I'm going to grind off the tack welds just a little bit. When you're doing that, you have different type of grinding wheels. This is your classic old hard wheel right here, and these are okay. You have flap wheels right here. These are a lot better. It keeps the metal cooler and things like that. But the problem with these two right here is that if you're grinding on something like this, it can give you an uneven grind and dip in and things like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a grinding wheel like this right here. And because the flat surface is there, when I grind, that flat surface will show up if I've got anything uneven, and I'll be able to fix it before I get welding too far. So I'm just going to go ahead and grind these guys down a little bit, let it cool up a little bit, couple of tack welds, cool down, a little bit of grinding, so on and so forth until I'm all done. It's going to be just a little bit, but you stick around. Now what you want to do is you want to space your welds out. I'm going to generally go in between the largest space I can find. I'll keep going in between those spaces and filling it up until I've just got little guys that are like maybe 1/4 of an inch, and then I can go ahead and hit it with the several shots, zot, zot, zot. But again, heat is your enemy. Now when you get about halfway through the heat and the welding and the grinding, things will get a little bit warped up sometimes. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to stop and make sure that everything feels proper and do your metal work now. After you do all your welding, it's going to be a lot more difficult to do. Now not only am I working the outside, I'm working the inside too. I'm hammering and dollying, and I'm getting welds on the inside too. You can generally see little holes and things like that you might have missed on the other side. So work both sides of the metal and you'll have both sides nice and straight. Everything's looking really nice. We've got this good and flat, sanded down on the inside and on the outside. Now what we can do is we can get these two pieces to merge down here. You don't want to do this until all of this is welded nice and secure. When you're doing this, you're going to go ahead and get everything to match down here and then weld it, and then go ahead and bring your welds up. The more it's welded together, the more you can manipulate it, and after I've got this more solid down here, I can take this last edge right here and roll it over to match this guy right here. Now when I was doing all the rest of my weldings, I was trying to keep my heat down. Right now, I'm not actually trying to do that, because if I can get this nice and warm, it makes it easier to bend over. So I'm going to be doing my welding a little bit faster to get this heated up and make it more malleable. All right, so everywhere on your doors and your fenders where you have a metal bending over like that on this edge right here, all of those spaces you're going to have rust going to be showing up there. So what we're going to do to keep this at bay is a couple of different things. One, I like to get something on here that actually cleans or eats the rust away. I'll make sure I get it up into all this kind of stuff too. We're going to kill 2-3 birds, 1 stone. And then after this is all cleaned up and it dries out and everything, then what I'll do is I'll actually get something like this that is specifically for rust. So any rust that's left over that I couldn't clean out, I'll be able to spray this on there and it will nullify that. Of course, after that's done, I'm going to go ahead and paint it to keep the rust from coming back before we're able to prep this for paint. Now what I'm going to do is go ahead and put this on here, and I'm just kind of getting it basically set up in there. I can go ahead and squeeze down my edge right here, and then I'm just going to take it and I'm going to put it and actually bolt it on the truck and just kind of see how things are looking, make sure that everything's looking okay. Sometimes you know, you just get lost in the metal work and things get a little off kilter for you. So one more check ain't gonna hurt nobody. So I've got it bolted in, and then I've got made sure that my bottom here is lining up really nice. I can look inside. I can see my gap where the two pieces are going to meet, have a nice space in them. It's not too far, it's not overlapping. So I'm really good and comfortable with this. I can take it back out and I can do a little bit more welding on it. All right, you remember a cardboard template right here? Periodically when you're doing your work, you want to go ahead and put that on there and make sure that the curvature and everything is working correctly. And especially before you're about to weld the brace in, because that's really going to firm this up. So you want to make sure that you've got everything looking exactly like you want it to. Now the upper structure of our inside core support is nice and solid. Now I can go ahead and finish off everything going here. Now I'm not going to weld anything down here just yet, and I'll show you why in a while. Now I'm going to go ahead and take this edge and we're going to go ahead and roll it on over. In order to be able to do that, I need to cut it down here at the bottom. So I'm going to do that now, and then we'll be able to roll that guy. Okay. Now when I'm rolling this edge over, I'm going to start by tapping it at the top. I'm going to do it nice and lightly, and I'm just going to go down the whole entire row. And when I'm doing that, I can't just have it roll in, roll in, roll in, roll in, because it's going to take this edge right here and take it too far over. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll it over until it looks like it's even, and then I'm going to bring it down so it looks a little something like this. So I'm going to use a straight edge here to make sure I'm getting everything nice and lined up. It's looking pretty close. Once I get it to that point, now I'm going to bring it down. Now I can go ahead and work in bringing it down. Whole time though, I'll be referencing this on and off. Now I want my thickness of metal right here on the overlap to be the same all the way down, even on my patch panel. So you can see this is a little bit thicker maybe on the camera there, I don't know. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to work this until everything matches all nice and neat. Now this is really probably the hardest thing to do on the repairs, to get this line perfect. And a lot of times I won't, to be honest with you. It's no big deal. Metal's very flexible, so to speak. All I have to do is if I've gone in too far, I'll just weld a bead on there and grind it down. If it's sticking out too far, I'll simply grind it down, and then I'll just go ahead and weld it back up and grind that down. So this is just about done, but I'm going to go ahead and bolt it on the truck one more time. And the reason being is when you bolt this inside core support on, sometimes if this is all welded up final, then it'll twist. So we bolt it on so that this core support's exactly where it's going to be. Then we go ahead and tack weld right here and here. It'll be solid. I can take it back off and I can finish off my welding right here. But if I do all that first, it'll be locked into place. And if I bolt it up and it twists, I'm going to be stuck. So we're not going to do that. So now I'm just going to go ahead and finish up some of the details. What I'm going to do right here is just take a drill bit and go ahead and drill through the first piece of metal just a little bit into the second piece of metal, and then we'll weld that up in a rosette weld that I'll show you in just a second. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and in the center of my hole, in the second piece of metal, on the bottom, I'm going to get a weld going there. Then I'll just go ahead and do a little bit of a round thing like this and finish it up. All right, go ahead and take a look at that. All right, so I want you to take a look and see what kind of detail I went into here. Where the overlap was going, I cut that nice and even. The rosette welds that we did look like original spot welds almost. I've cleaned up this down here on the corner, did a little bit more welding here. Everything looks as stock as I can get it because the attention to detail, the devil is in the details. If you spend this kind of time on the backside where nobody's even going to see it, imagine how good your front's going to look. Now I can go ahead and put this guy on. Before I do, I'll replace this rubber right here, but which of course we have. And so after I get that on, I'll go ahead and reattach this. We'll get it back on the truck and see what it looks like in just a second. All right, so you can see it, you can do it. We're here to help you guys get your trucks back on the road. You make sure that you check us out on Instagram and Facebook and ring bells and subscribe and all that kind of stuff you know you're supposed to do. Because next week I'm going to be working on a truck and you're going to want to see that video too. We'll see you all then, man.